Okay. Let me just check one thing, because I got my rooms mixed up. Yeah. This is 3, not 6. Remember, we had a different room originally, but for the videoing, we're here. Okay. As you may know, but you may have deliberately tried to forget, because it's a horrible thing, and we all try to ignore horrible things. Friday next week, Friday 23rd of July, which is our last official 2 hours together. During those 2 hours, we will have our final exam. Okay. In my experience with summer school, if you try and have the exam during the exam time, there's always someone who says, no, 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 my other teacher's got an exam then, and it becomes impossible. So the best thing is to do it in a class time, and then technically everyone can come except for, I mean, okay, Asena's got the problem of coming to Fikret and me, but I don't think you have a class on Friday. Do you? No, so we're okay. So this little guide here, I'm going to run through to give you some idea of what the exam will involve, to help you prepare for the exam, okay? And then if you've got any questions, you can ask me this week or next week, send me an email or something. So we'll spend the next kind of maybe 20 minutes or so working our way through this and having a go at 1 or 2 examples from this to help you all know what we're doing. So the final exam for HCIV102 will take place on Friday, 23 July 2010 and it's the class time. If you get here by 10:30, then we can perhaps start at 10:30, or we can finish at 12:40 or something, give you 2 hours or whatever, something like that. I'll try and give you 2 hours. Okay. And it's in this room. We'll be in this room just to avoid any confusion or whatever. I haven't given you yet your works back. I'm going to give you, probably on Wednesday, some of your work that you've done, the tests and so on, and things like that. Please bring, in the day of the exam, please bring anything I've given you with a grade on, so that I can keep them for the university archive, because they keep them there for a few years. But I'll give you as much as I can back on Wednesday, I hope. Okay, any questions there? Is that clear? So the structure of the exam, what? The final exam will be in 2 parts, which are logically called Part 1 and Part 2, because I'm obviously a logical kind of person. Part 1, this will be a series of short but important passages from various texts that we've been reading and studying in the summer school. Okay, so the holy books from the religions, the political writing from the beginning, things like that. The things that we've been talking about, we've had some presentations on, and so on. You will have to choose one of these passages and write an analysis and an explanation of it. You must show that you can understand what it's saying and how it is important for the whole text. A sample passage from a previous course is given on page 2. So now you turn over, and there it says sample passage for part 1 of the final exam. Okay, and here's an example, blah blah blah. Then it says number 4, and there we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 7 lines from John Locke's Second Treatise of Government. Okay, only 7 lines. So it's not a long passage. In fact, they're quite short. But it's something which I've considered to be important in some way, has some very important ideas and things like that. Okay, so that's the kind of thing. And there'll be a selection of those, maybe 10 of those. You just choose one and you write about it. And I'll explain a little bit later what you're meant to do. Okay? Okay, turn back again to the front. So that's part 1. Lots of these little passages, just choose one. Part 2, this will be a choice of 6 very general questions about an historical period or topic which you have studied during the summer school. You will have to choose one of these questions, and in each case, previously I've said 2, but we've got 2 hours exam, so this shouldn't be each. And here you should discuss 1 or more, if you want, of the texts we've been reading. So the ideas from the text will help you answer the question. The text you use to answer, so it's 2 questions there. The text you use to answer this question, one question, in part 2, cannot be the one you explained in part 1. So, for example, if you chose the John Locke passage, but this one won't be in the exam because I've given it to you as an example, but as an example, if you chose this passage and you write about it in part 1, you cannot answer a question about 17th century political thinking and politics and then use the ideas of John Locke as your explanation, because you've already got Locke in part 1. Okay? So, sorry? Say that again? Are they bounded? What do you mean? I don't understand. Is this anyway?
If we choose in a part one, for example, German, we will answer this question in part two.
No, you can't. That's what I'm saying. Okay, let's put it this way. Okay, part one, and you've got lots of different quotations, and you choose lock. Okay, part two. There will be 6 questions. The first 2, topic 1. The second 2, topic 2. The last 2, topic 3. Okay? 2 questions in each case relating to each topic. Now you can choose a topic 1 question about politics. You can choose to answer that, but you cannot use Locke. You can use... we didn't do Rousseau, did we? You can do Hobbes, okay, for example, or one of the other guys, Bossuet. So you can answer the question, so you can do 2 things that relate to topic 1, but you have to have a different text, okay, because you're using the background information, you're even going to be using the ideas from here, so you're reproducing, okay. So basically, you need to know 2 of the texts very well. And in most cases, that'll mean 2 different topics, because you've done how many essays? 2 essays, okay, on topic 1, definitely, and one of these 2 as well. So in most cases, if you did your essay for topic 1 and you did Locke, okay, and you did your essay for topic 2 and did Marx, then you'll choose this one here and do Marx. Okay, or you can choose the Marx quotation up here, in which case, of course, you can use Locke. Okay? Is that clear? Tamamma?
How many passages will be in the part 1 of the essay? How many are we supposed to...
Well, there'll be a maximum of 12, because we've done 3 topics, 4 texts for each one, though we haven't gone into the details of each one, because we haven't had enough presentations, but I've discussed the ideas myself. In this case, I could give 12, I might give 10. I'll have to see. Okay, I'll let you know that later on. But it'll be most of them, all or most of the texts. Okay, so if you've been coming to the class, listening to what I've said, heard the presentation, done your essay or whatever it is, you should have some idea of more than one of the texts. Okay, there shouldn't be a problem there. And if your text isn't here, if I give 10 and Locke isn't there, then of course you can use Locke for that one, for example. Okay? Other questions? Bashka? No? Okay. And again, there is a sample question on the other side, and it's very similar to the kinds of questions that I've been asking in the essays. Very, very big question. It doesn't say, what does Locke say, or tell me about Marx, or tell me about the Mormons. It's a very broad question about the historical theme or the historical period, where you're trying to connect some of the ideas or the historical events and so on.
And is this length is okay for you? Is it enough?
Sorry?
Is it enough to write 2 paragraphs?
No, this isn't the essay. This is just the skeleton. You will have 2 hours.
The second one is essay, but this is a
Shorter one, but yeah, it's there, but you should maybe spend, well, you technically have 2 hours on each, but maybe you should spend a little bit more time on the second one than on the first one. So the second one could be longer, okay? But you still need to write an essay-style answer explaining these ideas, and I'm going to run through this now and show you what I want you to do, okay? So let's take part 1.
Is there any possibility that we can extend the time for the exam? I mean, writing an essay in a time constraint is very stressing, and sometimes I lose my muse. I can't write anything.
In the past, okay, this summer school we've had 6 hours every week, and they've divided it 2, 2, 2. In the past, to make it kind of easier on my time, I've done 3 and 3. So we've had a 3-hour exam as well, okay, in the past. But in the past, I've said you do 3 things. You do 1 passage and you do 2 essays. So you'll get 2 hours, 1 hour for each thing, okay? That'll be enough. That people have done excellent, well, people have done very bad exams. They've also done some very good exams under these conditions from it. Right. But you may have had a 3-hour deal. I'm not really sure what happened then. But okay, let's run through the preparations and the points, and then you'll give you some idea of how you should prepare. Okay. So here we've got our lock quotation. Okay. You've chosen lock. You're sitting in the exam next Friday. It's 10:45, and you finally said, "Okay, I'm going to do the lock one." So what do you do? First, you read through, okay, carefully, perhaps more than once. Make sure you can understand all the words and phrases. There aren't many words here, it's only 7 lines. Look up in your dictionary, ask me for help if you need, something like that, okay. And then, well, of course, how should your answer begin? What should be the first thing at the beginning of your answer? Once you've written the number down, which is obviously number 4 in this case. Oh, thank you, Emma, nice pen here. What should be the first few sentences? What should they be? Think back to when I played my guitar and everything. What should everything should begin with an introduction of some sort, okay? In this case, nothing very complicated, but something that says, I will analyse this paragraph or this passage from John Locke's Second Treatise of Government. You can say something like that, okay? You can even perhaps say John Locke was a 17th century English philosopher or something very, very brief. But a short introductory thing, short paragraph at the start, okay? That should perhaps come first. Now, what I suggest we do is we approach it this way. Here is a small circle, and that represents the small passage. We've got 7 lines, very small. So it says here, write a summary or paraphrase of the passage in your own words in order to show that you understand it. So the next thing is some kind of summary. In this passage from his second treatise, John Locke says this, and then you go through, okay, explaining in your words more or less what's being said here. Secondly, you know who the authors, because we've got them all listed there, in this case it's Locke, are, and what the text is, because it tells you at the end of the passage. Okay, it says here, John Locke. So now you can try and show how the short passage above relates to Locke's general ideas in the second treatise. So now we expand. We start with our text. Now we try and connect this little passage. So let's call this passage, and let's call this book or text. Now you say, okay, this is only 7 lines, but it's 7 very important lines, and it's connected to the following big ideas in his book. What's he trying to tell us in this book? So the next thing would be the text, okay, and try and somehow connect them up. What is the main purpose of the text? What is the main argument or idea or ideas of the text? Finally, what, if any, do you think is the broader or more general significance of the passage above, as well as the whole text? For example, what aspect of 17th century political thought does this material illustrate? So the biggest circle is what we might call context or historical background. And then you can say, well, these ideas were new or they were standard, and you can connect this to here, and you can also connect that to there. Okay, let's put HB, and again, have these connections, okay? So we begin with something very, very small, and you say, look, it's 6.5 lines, David. How can I write an essay in an hour or 40 minutes from just 7 lines? I can tell you what it says. Well, here's what I think you can do. As I said, you begin with the passage, you explain what it is, Then you show how it's part of this bigger book, because there are lots of other ideas in the book, otherwise the book would just be 7 lines long. And then finally you connect those ideas and the book to the bigger context of political thought or political history, whatever it might be. Okay. So can we do that, do you think? Is that possible? Any questions about that? That's my suggested approach to this. And so the structure is something like this. Okay. Some brief introduction, just to make sure I can see what you're doing. Summarize the text. Okay. Tell me in your words what it's saying. The little passage here. Connect that to the bigger ideas in the text. But connect that to the historical background, and then obviously finish it off with some short conclusion or whatever it is. And I think with my help, if you don't understand the words, or you can ask me any questions in the exam, with my help, it should be possible to do that.
You can bring dictionaries and thesaurus with us, right?
You can bring things to help you understand. You can't bring your texts and photocopies and other things, okay? And obviously those of you with fancy phones, just use your fancy phones, look at words. Don't start looking at Wikipedia or somewhere else to get the other stuff. I'll be watching carefully, and if you're playing around on your phone for too long or something, I'll be suspicious. But it's mainly the ideas have got to come from up here in your heads, okay? Any other questions? Is that clear? Yeah? We haven't got time. We could actually do this one together, but we won't do that now, okay? Let's just move on then to what I've got to say about the question. So part 2. Here is an example of the sort of question that will occur in part 2. Okay? What are the main differences between divine right and contract theories of political power? Which topic is this? Topic 1. Okay, so it'll be probably, if there was a similar question to this one, it's going to be here somewhere. Okay, first 2 questions, because I'll put them in the right order. I won't mix them up to make it confusing or something. So as we said, if you want to answer this one, and you've done the Locke passage before, then you need to use one of the other texts, not Locke, of course, just to make that point again. Okay. So what have I got here? What are my suggestions? Okay, first you should make sure you know which topic is covered by the question. Go on, which topic is it? Well, we've just done that. Question is topic number 1. Once you've done that, you must begin by thinking about the question. Let's put another plan up here. So this is question number 2. It's often a good idea to make sure you put the question number there, because there have been times in the past, even when I've read someone's answer, I'm not for sure which question they're trying to answer. It should be obvious within the first sentence, but sometimes it takes a while. So just to help me get my head and think, okay, we're going this way and that way, write the numbers down. Okay, so here we go. Okay, and again, how do we start? How do we begin this essay answer to the question? With an introduction again, okay, which can be similar to the kind of introduction that you've been doing for your essays and can be different, okay. You must begin by thinking about the question. Remember, we said this back weeks and weeks ago. The whole of your essay is an answer to my question. That's what it is. It's a big answer. It's not just, what's your name? My name is Erdem, okay. It is a bigger answer, but it is still an answer. So everything you write should be helping you to prove your answer, to prove your reaction to my question. So the best way is to begin by discussing the question, okay? Which means a number of things. The most important one is understanding the words, making sure you understand all the words there, as we said, okay? That's part of the process of doing that, so let's just put that one in. And it says, put some historical background information, okay, here. So either as part of the introduction or separately, some kind of historical background about topic 1. So I've got some examples. For this question in particular, what do divine right and social contract mean? You need to explain near the beginning that divine right means what? Divine right.
The ruler takes his sovereignty from the God.
From God, yeah. And contract means doing what? Having a party? What about them? What are they doing? Agreement, that's the word there. It's a way of creating power through some kind of mutual, reciprocal agreement, an agreement between people or something like that. So even very briefly, even in half a sentence each, you could explain those and say, this question is about the difference between divine right and contract theories. Their main differences are this, and I'm going to explain these differences by looking at one or more of the texts or something. What were the main features of that historical period? Okay, well, you could talk about kingship, about absolute kingship, about the revolutions and things like that, and how they affected the ideas. You could have that as your introductory section. Next, you have to introduce the particular text or texts. If you want to do more than one, you can. You have chosen as an example of, well, I've got the wrong phrase here, but it's 17th century, okay, is what we're thinking about. What is it called? Who composed it? And basically, what is it about? Okay, so now we have the text, and you have to introduce the text. So you say, in order to discuss particularly divine right kingship, I'm going to talk about Filmer's Patriarcha, or I'm going to talk about Bossuet's text, or whatever it is, okay? Or Hobbes, if I'm looking at contract and Locke. So you introduce it, you say a little bit about it there, okay? Then you should summarize the text, mentioning what you think are the most important elements, okay? So again, the main ideas, particularly remembering the ideas that are connected to the question. Okay? It's things that relate to the question that are important. So you can go through the main 2 or 3 points that the text or texts have in relation to the question especially. Finally, you should explain what the purpose or main idea of the text is and use this to answer the question. Okay, so now we put an answer here. Okay, so it's kind of bringing in this and this especially to give your answer. Does the text show divine right or contract theory? Okay, and you're bringing in the historical background as well and putting it all together. And this is kind of your answer, which overlaps with your conclusion. And this is more or less a similar, but perhaps slightly simpler version of what we discussed for your essays as well. Okay, this is the main plan and things. So introduction, some kind of background, look at the text, briefly introduce the text, the main ideas of the text that you understand, and then try and bring it all together at the end somehow to show that this is your answer, that it means this or that. This is the main differences, whatever it might be. Okay.
Would I get more points if I talk about more, mention about more than one text and show you that I understand them both?
Let's say no to that. You may or may not do a better job with 2 texts. It partly depends on the question. I mean, this question here, saying divine right and contract theory, then in a sense it's asking you to discuss 2, to look at them in detail. But for the essay, I've only asked you to write an essay about 1 text. So if you did Hobbes, then in theory, apart from listening to what I said or what the presenters said, you weren't really going into detail about any of the other 3. So it would be unfair to say you must and definitely get more points by using 2, because that'll just put more pressure on you all. So if you think it will help, you don't have to go and photocopy and read the whole of the other text. If you did Hobbes, then Hobbes should be enough. But if you've been a good boy or girl, you've been taking notes, if you've been listening to what I said, if you've been listening to the presenters, then you should still remember a little bit about what the other guy said. So you can use that, okay, without going into detail. The details should be your 1 text. The other texts will help you depending on the question, okay, and the ideas. And at the moment we're going through these religions. There'll be 2 questions about religions. You can choose the Mormons, okay, but if you've been listening to what I said about Sikhs, if you listen to me, depending on the time today or on Wednesday, about the Baha'i faith and then Rastafarians later in this week or next week, those ideas might still be in your head. You might be able to use them here to answer the question, depending on the question. But you don't have to go into detail, okay? It's all been done. You've all been coming here, so you've all received this information, these ideas, so you should be prepared and able to use it.
This guy that I
No. Okay.
It will help.
Yeah, but then you'll all give you. I still want you to be individuals, so it's not a difficult thing. It's not a detailed thing, is it? So I will explain again briefly in the before the exam begins. I'll explain the processes. So you bring your dictionaries and you bring your brains, and hopefully you bring your memories of the things that you've read and you've heard and things like that. Okay. And I know that it's not an open book exam, so I don't mark it. I don't grade it according to the same criteria, the same factors, as if I'm listening, if I'm reading someone who's got all their notes with them and things. So don't worry about that either, okay? Any other questions? Is that clear? So look at these. In terms of your preparing for the exam, read through these points, okay? And then if you've got any questions, you can ask me in class or you can send me a mail before next Friday, okay? Otherwise, be here 10:30, a bit earlier than usual, so we can start as soon as possible. Okay? Tamam? Okay, and there's a few people not here, so if they're here on Wednesday, I'll briefly give these out, but we won't go into the details. Okay, we've got about 15 minutes left, so let's make a start on our next religion. Which is the Baha'i faith. Sometimes it's called Baha'ism, but that's not usually accepted. It sounds a bit odd, and they might even put the little thing in there. But so we'll use, I think, what's the generally accepted term for this religion, which is the Baha'i faith. Okay, a couple of decades, only 20 years or so, 15, 20 years or so after Joseph Smith Jr. was becoming the first Mormon, in a sense, in America, a number of other guys were in the process of creating this religion in, beginning in Iran. And I think this is a picture of some kind of 19th century Baha'i believers from Iran, but a bit later on when the religion is established. So also less than 200 years old, also very, very recent. There are, these days, I think, maybe around about, I said 6 million believers in the Baha'i religion. Okay, so it's fairly small, smaller than the others we've been looking at.
Sorry, is this the amount of believers today, or?
Today. We're talking about today. Beginning in Iran, but it's, for various reasons, not a very secure place to be a Baha'i these days. They do undergo some persecution and so on. And it is, in fact, a fairly worldwide religion spread to most parts of the world today. These 6 billion people are divided in many places. Though their base, their center is in Haifa, in what is now Israel, though it's not, we don't connect it with Judaism in any way. That's to do with historical reasons that we'll explain later on, to do with the Ottoman Empire and so on, in fact. Okay. Their main prophet, there was someone who came before him, we'll mention that in a few minutes, but their main founder is a guy generally called Baha'u'llah. And the word Baha'i comes from the Arabic Baha, well, I'm not very good at these glottal stops, but Baha or something like that, which means glory. So a Baha'i can mean glorious or of the glory, something like that. Okay. In fact, I realize I put this one in the wrong place. And obviously, his name means something like the glory of God, or the glory of Allah, is the meaning of his name, therefore. And this is a monotheistic religion. This is why we've got it in our topic. And they emphasize unity of people. They try and see the world in a big picture. Okay, so they're not focusing on this is a religion for Iranians or something like that. They want to be a world religion. So they want unity of humans, and also, as we shall explain maybe next time, unity of religions. Okay, they try and stress that all religions in the past are part of an ongoing process. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Sikhism, they're all got part of the truth. They're all part of the true process. The Baha'is are also part of that process. Now, the interesting thing, which I think we mentioned before, is they're not the last one. They don't claim that we are the last ones, we have the truth. Most religions do that. They say, okay, all the other people have got it a bit wrong. Our prophet came and we've got the truth. That's what most religions do. They don't seem to do that. They say, all the other religions have got part of the truth in the past. They were correct for that time. We carry on up to now. Our prophet has come with a new message. And later, new prophets will come and new religions will come. Okay, so we don't have... Sorry? Yeah, in that sense, by our standards and by the standards of other religions, fairly open-minded, okay? They still believe in what they believe and they have certain rules and so on, but they're not saying we are the last, we are the truth, which is what most religions do. They are saying things will carry on afterwards, okay? God sent one religion for people then, now we're the latest one, because we've got the united world and everything is coming together, we've got technology and so on, but later on things will change and God will send a new prophet, a new set of ideas, a new messenger, we'll come to that later, to do things. So it's this unity of both humans but also religions, which is quite important. Okay, two main founders of the religion and then some kind of successors afterwards. The first founder, kind of pre-founder, was a guy called Sayyid Ali Muhammad Shirazi. Okay, so presumably he or his family came from the Iranian city of Shiraz. But to make it easier, he's usually known by the shorter nickname of the Bab. Okay, which means something like gate, I think, or opening, something like that. Okay. Now, he established what is sometimes called the Baha'i religion, which kind of changed later on into the Baha'i religion. So it's a kind of early form of what becomes the Baha'i. Okay. And this was going on, Baha'i religion was going on 1844 to 1850. Okay. So during the 1840s, Sayyid Ali Muhammad Shirazi, the Bab, was spreading his ideas and getting people to follow him, okay, as a kind of prophet. But, he said, there will be another messenger of God after me. Okay, so he didn't claim to be the final true prophet. He said, soon someone else will come. I'm just starting the process off. I'm just the initial stage. I'm the sort of beginning of that, in a sense. Okay, and then when the true messenger of God will come, that will bring the day of God. That will bring peace and justice to the world. Okay, I'm just the first step. I'm just stage one in that process. So he's a bit like, if again we mentioned this last time, the figure John the Baptist in the New Testament, in the Gospels. There's Jesus, and John the Baptist kind of comes and says someone else will come after. Very similar kind of role, perhaps, to what was going on. Now, obviously, the Qajar Iranian government at the time didn't like the ideas of the Bab and his Babi followers, so they arrested him, and eventually they executed him. There is a story that, in fact, the first attempt with lots and lots of guys with guns to shoot him failed, and they shot him, and then when all the dust settled, he wasn't there, and they found him in the prison again, and they had to drag him out and shoot him a second time. And obviously, this is some kind of miracle story that are often connected to religion, so we won't go into the truth of it or not, but you can see how things get connected to these guys. So, in July 1850 he was finally executed, okay, which should put an end to his religion. That should have put an end. And they arrested many of his followers, many of the people who were accepting his ideas. One of his followers was this man, Mirza Hussein Ali Nuri, okay, who becomes Baha'u'llah. Okay. So he was one of the followers. He was one of the people accepting and following the Bab during the 1840s. I have his exact dates, in fact. I don't know about the Bab, but he was born in what for us is 1817 and died in 1892. And during this period, he was connected to the Bab and his belief. He came from an important Iranian family, noble family, rich, wealthy family. He was not a poor guy, okay? And that probably helped him. He probably wasn't killed because he was from an important family. He was just kept in prison. And as the story goes, while he was in prison, kept in prison by the Qajar Iranian government, he received his first revelation from God. He received his first visitation from God in prison, okay? And he had a number of others later on, but the first time he had something special. Then, 1853 to 6, the Iranians said, we can't keep these people here, they're causing trouble, the ones we can't kill, or whatever it was. So the Ottoman government agreed to have them sent over into what is now Iraq. Okay, so they spent time in Baghdad and in northern Iraq. So they were kind of prisoners, exiles outside of Iran in the Ottoman territory, where it was felt they would cause less trouble because they're obviously not at home causing trouble in Iran. So they agreed to kind of look after them. And it's during that time that Mirza Hussein Ali becomes the leader of the Babi religion. Okay, he decides to this period he becomes the leader. Finally, in 1863 in Baghdad, he tells the other followers, the other Babi people, he says, look, I am in fact the promised one. I am the other messenger of God that the Bab mentioned. Okay, I've received visits and revelations from God. Now I realize that that is what I am. I am the one that he said would be coming. Okay, so he becomes then not just the leader, but also he becomes a kind of prophet. And he says, now we're going to change and we're going to call it something new. So now we have the Baha'i religion. Okay, we're not Babis anymore. We're something different. I've got some new revelations where we've got a new religion. Okay, so it's at that point that he creates or proclaims this new religion. He then spent the rest of his life, from 1868 more or less until his death, in Akka, still in Ottoman territory, in what is now Israel. Okay, so the final few decades of his life there, leading his religion. Okay, he had a certain amount of freedom. He couldn't move around so much and go back to Iran. But he spent the last years of his life there and eventually died in May 1892. He wasn't executed. I think he died of natural causes and so on. So he's the important figure. Stage one, the Bab. Then one of his followers, Baha'u'llah, becomes the leader of the Babis, and then eventually he says, no, I'm in fact the promised one, and this is the new religion, this is the truth that the Bab was mentioning. After he died, Baha'u'llah was succeeded by his eldest son, Abdul Baha, okay, which means something like the servant of glory. And he becomes the leader of the Baha'is, and it's during his time that they begin to spread their religion into Europe and North America. So into kind of powerful Christian areas. That's why it's now very different from, its perspective is very different from its origins. Okay, so even during that period, and he dies 1921, okay, they begin to spread and get some supporters afterwards. Then, after Abdul Baha dies, he is succeeded as leader by Shoghi Effendi, and they always spell it in the non-Turkish way with double F. That's the way they spell it. It's the same word as Efendim and all that, but they have a double F, which you don't have in Turkish, do you? There's no double F. But that's how it's officially spelled, okay? And he has the title Guardian of the Faith, okay? Protector, someone who's guarding, protecting their religion. Okay, that's his title. And he was the grandson of Abdul Baha. So you have father, son, and then grandson between these guys. Okay. And during his time, they began to spread their religion into Africa, South America, and South Asia as well. So it's during his period down to 1957 that they begin to spread in other parts of the world as well. Finally, in 1963, 1 year before I was born, tell you how old I am again, in 1963, which it may be deliberate, I'm thinking about it, because it is in fact exactly 100 years after Baha'u'llah pronounced himself as the promised one and so on. So 100 years later, 1963, the Baha'is set up the Universal House of Justice. Okay? And it's kind of like a parliament. It's an elected body of Baha'i people who make the main decisions. So they don't have a one-man leader anymore. They have an elected assembly of representatives. Okay? And the ultimate authority in any issues and arguments and problems and decisions will go to these people sitting on this elected body. And they are elected for, I think, 5 years. Okay, after 5 years, they have a new election, and new people are chosen, or perhaps people can be re-elected, but it's not a permanent position or something like that. So they've introduced elements of what we would see as democracy into the organization of their religion. Okay, 100 years after it kind of officially began. Okay, that'll do us for today. That's the background to the Baha'i religion. The main thing to point out, as I said, is that it has its origins in Iran, and there are still Baha'is who live in Iran today, but it's a worldwide religion. It exists in countries where we would traditionally not see being very Islamic, not seeing big countries for Islam. It's a general, universal religion, and that's one of the things that they try to achieve. Okay, any questions about your second topic essay? Any problems there? Any questions about the exam for next week? You can send me an email. I have my office hours tomorrow afternoon. Now, Asena, there is no Emre at the moment. I will send him an email. But are you free tomorrow afternoon? Can you come and see me sometime between 1:30 and 3:30 tomorrow? Okay, come to my office. Not the library, but I'll be in my history office, MA123, Management Building, 1 floor up from, you know where it is, I think, anyway. I will email Emre and say we have the meeting and try and make sure he comes if he can. And we'll start planning your presentation together, okay? Okay, rest of you, see you all on Wednesday. Thank you very much.